Okay, so this is my video on filtration of the kidneys, and this is what I could find in my kitchen in my house. So here we go. So if the kitchen I'm standing in is the kidneys, this countertop would be, or this section of countertop would be a renal pyramid. And part of this, so going into it, we have the glomerular capsule, and the capillaries bring in all of this stuff. And it comes in, and here at the glomerulus, or the Bowman's capsule, it does filtration. And so it decides that it wants to keep certain molecules and get rid of others. So let's take those away. So in the cortex, we have molecules that we've decided to move, decided to move and go through the process of reabsorption, excretion, and secretion. And so we have our water, this little blue packet, our chloride, this little yellow packet, our sodium, yes, which is this packet, and then our potassium, which is this packet. And then our potassium is not as prominent as the other three. However, so let's get started. In the proximal convoluted tubule, which is this mesh I have right here, so in the cytoplasm of the epithelial cells of this tubule, it has a lower concentration of sodium because the plasma membrane has a low permeability to sodium, as well as NAK pumps pumping sodium out of the cell, which is causing a concentration gradient. So go whoop. So the sodium wants to go into the epithelial cells of the proximal convoluted tubule. And then, so here is a major site of reabsorption for both sodium and water, because the sodium pumped into the interstitial fluid by the NAK pumps creates a potential difference, which drives Cl, which is also in the proximal convoluted tubule. It follows sodium out and creates salt. And then once this salt is in the interstitial fluid, it can be reabsorbed. However, this salt increases osmolality, and so it draws water out via aquaporins in the plasma membrane of the epithelial cells. And then so once water is drawn out, it, as well as the salt, can be reabsorbed. And we move in to the loop of Henle, okay, which is in the inner medulla. And so here in the descending limb, here in the descending limb, it is only permeable, only water can move out of it. So it is drawn out and is reabsorbed because the interstitial fluid around this is hypertonic, which means that there is an excess of salt in the interstitial fluid, which is wanting to draw water out. And so in the ascending limb, a high concentration of solute from the bottom of the descending limb, which is like how Dr. Walker described it, high amounts of Kool-Aid powder with very small amount of water. It is causing the Na plus to want to come out of the tubule. And so the active transport of the sodium drives secondary active transport of both chloride as well as potassium. But potassium goes back into the filtrate to be used kind of on a circle to keep the Na plus pumping. And then here it can also be, Na is also reabsorbed into the bloodstream. And then we move into the distal convoluted tubule, which is in the cortex. And here we have mostly Na plus and Cl. So here, NaCl is salt, is actively transported out of the distal convoluted tubule. And here we also have urea present. And here, urea, about 30% of the urea in the distal convoluted tubule has been reabsorbed. And then we move on So in this collecting duct, which I made here, so it's impermeable to salt, but it is permeable to H2O. And water is drawn out via osmosis, which can be regulated by the presence of aquaporins. And then aquaporins are present in the plasma membrane, and the amount of aquaporins present depends on the amount of vasopressin or ADH. And if your body has different needs, for example, if you're severely dehydrated, your body is going to increase the amount of ADH produced, which is going to increase the amount of aquaporins, and thus more water is going to be reabsorbed into the body from the collecting duct. And then different waste products such as K+, hydrogen ions, which impact pH by lowering pH, bicarbonate ions, which make it more alkaline, as well as drugs, are secreted into the renal tubules, which go to the bladder through the ureters as urine. And then urine passes from the bladder to the urethra when we pee, and thus getting rid of all of our body's unwanted things. Okay,